Okay, welcome very much. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
What is the date? It's the 23rd, isn't it? Of
That's
December?
right. It's an honor to be here.
2000. Well, it's an honor to welcome you. And in the audience, welcome very, very much to Conversations. Pleasure to welcome to the program Rolando Bini. And he's been a guest in the past. And he's the executive director of an organization called, excuse me, Parents in Action.
Correct.
And it's a very interesting one that has a great deal to do with social justice. And welcome very, very much to Conversations again.
Thank you.
Share with us, we did it in the past, but share with us a little bit in a thumbnail way, your background, born and raised, educated a little bit. And then we're going to talk about education, foster care, and some of the issues that are at the core of your website and your activity.
Yes.
But your own background.
I am a Latino immigrant. I wasn't born here. I lived 41 years in New York, but I was born in Ecuador, South America, in Guayaquil.
In Guayaquil, down on the ocean, yeah.
By the ocean. I'm proud of my culture. I think immigrants and Latino immigrants contribute a lot to this country.
They certainly do, yeah.
We take the worst jobs usually, and I think that we bring a lot of values, cultural values.
No doubt. Yeah.
Family values, which I think is important. I think human capital is important.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I think it's been like that the history of the nation, because there's groups after groups, great number in 1880s from East Europe.
Yes, and they bring a lot of capital, human
They also
value.
have to suffer very often
At the beginning, the first two
people who are already here.
generations.
Yeah.
I live 41 years in New York. I have 2 children born here in New York State. And that's the only 2 children that I have, and I'm very proud of them.
Okay, yeah.
That's how we project through our children.
Yeah.
We live in our children.
Yeah, I think that's true, yeah. And you said that he's your son, I think you said, is going to school.
Yes, I have a son who is, my youngest son is 18 years old.
Okay,
And I took him to public school till he was 7.
Yeah.
Then he had a very traumatic experience in public school.
Really?
And I decided to get him out of public school because I realized that public school in New York City at least does not educate our children and rather place them in grave danger. So I decided to homeschool him for 9 consecutive years, since he was 7 till he was 16.
That's really interesting.
Yes, and it was a blessing experience. It was a most beautiful experience because I had him with me every day. We went to museums, we went to demonstrations, to rallies. We traveled a lot. We went to the U.S. Social Forum in Atlanta, Georgia. He went to India a couple of times.
With you?
No, actually he went by himself.
When he got older,
plane when he was 14, and he traveled. He was friends waiting for him. He stayed for a month. So he has a broader mindset, and in my opinion, he's getting a superior education. He wanted to go to school, so since I didn't have the economic resources to send him to a good private school that goes along with my values, I decided to send him to my native country, which is Ecuador.
Yes.
And he goes to one of the best private schools, and I'm proud. He's getting a superior education, something that he couldn't get here, even if he was a millionaire.
That's very, very interesting. Education is very important. You said a number of things. It's interesting. You said he was in school until he was 7. He would have only been a couple of years because you only go to kindergarten when you're 5, and he was only 2 years there. And the 2 years were enough to have you convinced that the education he was getting was not what it ought to be.
He wasn't getting an education. I think that the purpose of public school in New York City, at least I'm talking from my experience, has nothing to do with education. First, public school is a misnomer. It's not public, it's government, and it's not education. Public school is not public education. It's not education actually. It's schooling. So it should be, instead of public education, it should be called by its proper name, which is government schooling, which is 2 different animals.
Well, in thinking, we tend to think of, if I may, it's a big issue, and we tend to think of world's national, local, national, world society in terms of a dyadic thing. We've got a private sector. We talk about private sector, and that's usually corporate profit making, the major corporations and so forth. Then we call it the public sector, but that's generally the governmental sector of the society.
They control the curriculum.
The government has the ability to legislate, regulate, and and distribute income also through government activity, and that's called the public sector. You want to call it government sector. I think it's fair to call it government. But those are the two things in which most all of our institutions are seen and most of the news is reported.
My understanding, and this is my conclusion, is that public schooling or government schooling is a mechanism of population control and social control. It has nothing to do with education. On the contrary, I think children get miseducated. Children who enter school are bright, full of life, with great imagination. By the time they get out of the school or finish high school, if they ever finish, imagination has evaporated. Critical thinking has almost disappeared. Self-esteem has been put to the floor. Their IQ has gone down significantly, and there are studies who show that. I mean, they show that the purpose is rather to dumb them down. And I happen to agree with this gentleman, which I met personally, John Taylor Gatto.
Oh, I love Gatto. He's
who
a
was
great
the best
guy,
teacher of the year in New York State.
Yeah,
and New York
he's a
City
great
for
guy.
many
Give him my
years.
best regards. We did a program with him. We had trouble at technical.
And he wrote those two important books.
Very good guy.
Dominoes Down and The Underground History of American Education, which, in my opinion, he proves beyond a reasonable doubt that public schooling in New York City has nothing to do with education, but rather dumbing down the masses so they can serve the masters.
Well, okay. Again, I love Gatto and Jonathan Kozol I like also very much and everything. But I mean, I don't quite understand. We had Horace Mann, and we had the idea of public school as a way for the least advantaged people to get some education, whereas historically it's only been the kings and the earls that had any education. There was no capability out of public funds or anything to have schools for the poor. It was only a matter of going to Eton and Harrow, Cambridge and Oxford, and for the elite always was education. And so the idea of having a public school system for everybody seems on the surface of it democratic, allowing people who had not had any access to education at all throughout most of history, because it's been a system of injustice.
Correct.
In terms of class considerations. So that idea of public school is that you get some education to them, and you seem to make a distinction with government education.
Correct.
As opposed to, is it fine okay if everybody was educated by a corporate entity that does education or something? I don't quite understand. What is it about the government that is so bad?
Well, I think that basically...
I think all education does those things.
I think the concept it was originally good, I think, but it has been misapplied. I mean, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
But I think that at present, the government has been hijacked by certain groups and use it as a mechanism of social control to oppress other groups. So they write the laws, they control the public schooling system, the government schooling system, and they use to give a basic knowledge training to the masses so they can properly serve their masters. But
that's what
but not an education. And in this respect, John Taylor Gatto cites documentation in his books where after the Bolshevik revolution in Russia, the global elites were very scared because this small group of people said they wanted to overthrow the powerful of the earth.
They did.
And they analyzed, and in their think tanks studies, they came to the conclusion that the Tsar of Russia had made a terrible mistake that could never be repeated, because in spite of being a dictator, he gave education to the masses of the Russian people. But what did the educated people in Russia did? They overthrew him and even killed him and his family.
What's the lesson?
The lesson is you cannot educate the masses. You need to give them a schooling, which is a different thing. It's like you train a dog to see, to roll over, to salivate when you ring the bell, but not to think deeply, because if people start thinking deeply, they will change the system.
Well, we're on a planet, third in this solar system. We have a great deal of intellectual understanding increasingly, and we understand things, and we have understanding of things that are evolving, and we have an integrated system, and we still do not have, through all of our educational efforts, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about Oxford and Cambridge, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, or anything like that, we still, and then relating it to the political process and the corporate process of corporate activity in the economic sphere and everything, we still don't have a system of justice for the world that is adequate to what the future requires. We have not yet come up with what Bucky Fuller, a great comprehensive thinker, would have said is an operating manual for Spaceship Earth, where we know what the situation that we're in is, rather than arguing about a lot of different interpretations of what it ought to be and so forth. We still don't, I agree, we haven't met the challenge despite billions of dollars, both corporate and private sector, and effort within the other societies to come up with an understanding that is worthy of the term real education.
But I don't think the money is the problem, because there is plenty of money. They can print all the money that they want out of thin air. It is rather using money and power as a mechanism of some groups to control others. I think that's the bottom line. So money is not going to solve the problem. It's not a problem there is not enough money. The problem is that it is designed in a certain way, and the groups that control, keep the control, they want to keep their privileges and make sure that the children and grandchildren keep those privileges.
Well, that's the history of the world.
Correct.
It's the history of the world. It's never been just. We ought to get that straight. There's never been justice. There's always been, from civilization began 8,010 years ago, a small group who would run the society. Pharaohs in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Rome ruled for 1,000 years, and then you had kings in England with dynastic states. The peasants were wallowing around in the mud. The class distinction, all the wealth such as there was owned by a few. It's like that today.
And even in Greece, at the golden age of Greece, there was a small group of patricians, and they had slaves. And of course,
it was the slave system.
Yeah, the others could have democracy because they could have lazy time to think and study science and philosophy.
Who had lazy time to think about philosophy? Oh, I mean the members of that society served by the slaves.
By the slaves, yeah, because the slaves were doing their hard work.
That's what I'm saying. It's always been a small group who run things and have control, political, economic control, and they run it for their interests, and then they have slaves to serve their needs. And they have to have the people slaves to do what they're told, and the slaves would have no rights or anything. They just did what they were told, like you would say an animal, a dumb animal, or a private in the army that is taught to do what he's told without thinking. And that's what the process of socialization was about.
And that's what the schooling is about.
That's what the whole socialization of the society is about. Because we still have a class-ridden, unjust, economic, social, and political order in every political entity and the world system, one country to another and so forth. It's still fundamentally unjust and unworkable in terms of what the future requires.
I agree, because there is enough resources for every single human being to have everything they need, but the problem is that the groups that control they're afraid of losing control, and they think if the other people the masses get a real education, they're going to start thinking deeply and get rid of the people who are oppressing them and using them.
Okay, if you were a Marxist, some people were Marxists, a lot of left.
I have no ideology. I think ideologies are good for children, and they are like religions, but I have gone beyond that.
Okay, I'm glad you've gone beyond it. I think that's interesting, but a lot of people have not, intellectuals. And if you think of intellectuals by and large, I don't know, if you were to think in terms of politics or the realities of the world, I don't know of right-wing elements of the intellectual community that have very much to do with the question of justice for the masses. There may be some.
I'm not aware.
Well, Burke was good, and the people of individual rights and respect for private property, respect for individual rights.
I know that a lot of Christians in the South, and they do homeschooling because they happen to agree with me in the sense that they think that public schooling is not going to be good for them, and so they may be very conservative, and at least they protect their children, so they pass the same values to the children, which I think is valuable, because between the family and the government, I think the family should have a first right over the children instead of the government. Because the government could be hijacked by any group of power and use the power of the government to try to re-socialize families and children according to their agenda.
Yeah, right. I understand. Whereas the family, like a Christian, evangelicals have formed, I think the evangelical Christians have a view of the universe which involves God and all these kind of things that are in the minds of a lot of scientific thinking, fairy tales that give people a sense of identity.
Right.
And they formed, the evangelical Christians formed about 40% of the power base for George Bush, who was our president, who did a lot of bad things like make war on Iraq and Afghanistan, torture people, and
Very
so
big
forth.
contradictions there.
So when you've got a religious group that are bigoted, as many religious groups are, they want to impose their view upon their children and make them as bigoted as they are and ignorant. Whereas there's a public thing where you're going to have give free rein to wide thinking and creative thinking, and that's not something that people who have a small view of the universe, like a religious view, would want to have indoctrinated by having their view of things, diluted.
Yeah, but I think that even
You understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
Yeah.
But I think that even with the narrow view, which I happen to agree that some fundamentalist groups could have, I think that their education is superior to what you get in public school, because in public schooling, children get dumbed down. They lose the ability to think critically. They lose the imagination, which is a very basic survival tool. The IQ goes down, so they become like
You
zombies.
keep saying that, yeah.
And I think that between two evils, I rather prefer that type of evil, because still those children one day could realize, because they still have imagination, they still have critical thinking, they could see that there is something better. The others are already zombies. Once the mind of the child is destroyed, there is very little you can do with it. There are some studies that show, and I like the work of Alexander Neal, who founded the Summerhill School in England.
Oh yeah, Summerhill, yeah.
Where he used two things, freedom and love, and freedom and caring. Where children who had a lot of freedom and they were troublemakers, they were expelled from other schools because they were troublemakers. They were troublemakers to the parents, and of course they were troublemakers to the school system.
Right.
But with freedom and love, when they got to 14, 15 years old, even if they had not studied anything, in 1 or 2 years they could learn everything that they should have learned in grammar and high school, and they were excellent students because they had a mind. But in the public school system, children, when they get to 14, 15, almost have not a mind. The mind is totally destroyed, and they don't have the ability to learn anything. This is the big difference.
Oh, okay.
Because most of what is taught in grammar and high school, it is repetitive. And now with access to the internet, you could have up-to-date information, probably more up-to-date what is on the books.
Right. Okay,
So-
that's well taken. That's a point well taken. But you've also got a lot of parochial schools that are that dumb down and teach by rote.
That's correct.
And most of the things, the systems, bureaucracies that are doing education are doing that. It's not just those that are in the public sector.
Right.
It's not just public schools. You seem to have a brief against government.
Right,
That's
because
okay, I
it
can
has been
understand.
hijacked by certain groups who have an agenda
You think they've
and
been-
use it to keep other ethnic groups down forever. I mean,
Yeah.
if the situation doesn't
understand.
change,
No, we understand.
and
We
the
agree on that.
masses are getting dumber by the day.
And
Not only
but not only the masses, but also the bright. We don't have any intellectuals of any note that have answers. They've not come up with any solutions.
I agree
And
with
what they've done is, there are a few intellectuals that have stood the test of time, but they're not really, and they haven't come up with any answers in a time of crucial need of comprehensively understood answers. So the intellectual enterprise has fallen down on the job, and one of the things that they've done is they've become, at academic level, if you're talking academic, like university and that, they've become so specialized into one thing.
They have lost sight of the whole forest. They just see at the tree.
Exactly right, and that's what's happened, particularly since
That's part of the dumbing down process, that you lose the picture.
It's not dumbing down. What it is, you know more and more about a smaller and smaller area. You become a specialist, and that becomes favorable within the market.
It's easy to manipulate.
And I don't think the corporate sector, if that's the other side, if you're talking about, other than individuals, that's different, family, but the corporate sector isn't noted for being democratic or encouraging, and it's rather military. You got a senior vice president, and the people are being trained to be
in the power of the right race.
Order. No, to the orders of the person in a hierarchy above them to do in a cubicle corporate situation what they're told to do, very much like an animal, and that's the response they want, and that's what the educational system within the corporate,
they are going to be the
private sector world is doing.
They are going to be the
managers. It's not just public. It's not just the government.
That's right. They are going to be the managers of the system, not the owners. Some of them may be the owners, but the majority will be the managers.
The ownership class is very narrow. It's very tiny, plutocratic, like always, like kings in the old days. And that's one system that has to be addressed.
Going back to the parochial schools that you mentioned.
Yeah, Catholic. Yeah.
Let's say Catholic.
You just go through a catechism. You say the same thing over and over.
In spite of everything that has, I agree with you, has a lot of shortcomings. I still think it's far superior to public schooling. Why? Because the human values, you want to call it, spiritual values, ethical values, moral values, in those schools, if you put a child in a school that goes to your values, they're going to reinforce your values. So that is something that has a human capital that is very high. My experience is that public schooling in your city, from the very first day that the child goes to school, even if he goes to pre-K, and even if he goes to a daycare center that is run by the government, they are teaching
the government.
Right.
What if it's the private sector? What if it's a child thing at a corporation?
Well,
anyway, it would still be functioning the same way.
No, it's a different
What's
thing.
The difference?
The difference is
you think the government is evil, trying to destroy people or something?
Well, control people. I don't think it's evil.
Well, the corporation mindset is too also.
But let me explain my point of view. The child that goes to kindergarten or pre-K, from the very first day, the teachers, whoever is in charge of that child in the school, is going to start taking away the authority of the parents from the very first day, and it's a struggle between the family, the parents, and the public school.
What if the parents suck? What if the parents are dictatorial and they beat them, and the parents aren't all angels?
I agree with you.
Okay.
There are some, but that's
a lot
exception.
of them are very bad parents.
No, but there's exceptions. There's bad parents are the exception. By nature,
because they've been conditioned.
By nature, it is nature. You cannot go against nature. Parents are the best protectors of the children, because if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't be here. We would have disappeared millions of years ago. Through thousands and millions of years of evolution, we have refined that parents, not only humans, but in every single species, fight for their little ones, even to their own lives. So to think that the government could be a better parent than the natural parents, it beats logic, because before the government didn't interfere. And you can see you have a cat, a she-cat that just had a litter. You try to take away the cat. You may be 100 times more weight and volume than that. She will fight you, because that's nature, and it's nature that tells you to defend your own. So to think that a stranger, either for good intentions or with the love of money, will be a better parent than the parents, it defies logic.
Okay.
And I think by interfering, the family is a delicate ecosystem, but when the government interferes in the family, the only thing it's going to create is havoc.
How can you have good families when you don't have an economic system or a class system that is just?
I agree that they affect.
I agree that they affect. A prejudice against the people who are weak and poor.
I agree with you.
Stay that
way. The system.
Can you get any justice for those people? Only through government, because the corporate
I don't think the government
want to provide.
But the government,
the corporate world will not.
The corporate world own the government, and they use the power of the government to make sure those poor keeps poor.
So
and
you
ignorant.
think there's an element of society, because I said most all the news and everything, public sector, private property, private ownership, profit, That's corporate.
Correct.
That's AT&T, the big corporations that run everything on a world scale. And then there's government that can have some regulation and some ownership. They can tax.
Government
they
is
can distribute it,
controlled by the private property. Those who own the private sector control the government, and they use the power of government to keep the masses.
Yeah, but you're saying there's an element of society which is at the family level, of the family.
Right,
and that's pure. And that's
that,
good, and they don't have the problems that you do from the political order, from private and public sector, the way the news.
That's why I recommend
and the family's pure.
I recommend homeschooling because that's the only way you can keep the government has been hijacked by the corporate elites as
so
a tool of population control.
You can keep your children protected against the slings and arrows of an incompetent and ignorant slave-producing private and public sector in terms of world organization. Only the family can have that.
To me, the family is the natural cell of society and is the last focus of resistance to total government control.
It is happening. Okay, I see. That's.
And now let me give you an example.
Yeah. Okay.
The child goes to school. One of the first things that from the very first day, I'm talking about New York, the child is taught is to call 911 on their parents. The child becomes a spy, an informant against the parent. Let's say the mother has an argument with the father at home, which happens. It doesn't have to be physical.
It does, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah. And it happens in every family, but the child is told to be as a spy, and they're told to write a journal. The journal is like a diary that doesn't come home, but the child could write, oh, last night my father and my mother were arguing. That is a call to Child Protective Services. That is a call to the police. They come and interfere with that family, and they could take all the children away, and even it disrupts the family.
Yeah, okay.
So there is a power struggle between the public schooling system and the family for control of that child. And in the long run, the public schooling system has everything to win because it counts with the CPS, which in New York City is the Administration of Children's Service, ACS.
Yeah.
It counts with the police, the DA's office, the district attorney, the judges, the family court, the criminal court, everything.
Yeah.
So the children realize that the parents have no power. So they start listening more to the teachers, but the teachers have an agenda. The teachers the purpose of the teacher is dumb the children down, even if the teachers have a good heart.
Well, they might do that in the name of making the children become practical so that they will function well, be able to have a job where they can get money to buy bread and have a successful family life.
Correct. The teachers are doing just a job. They're part of the system.
Of bureaucracy.
Yeah. And if they don't follow the line, they will be fired.
What about the idea that the parents, you're looking at things sociologically, it's a very interesting question. You're looking at things sociologically in terms of the whole society, and the parents, the reason the parents often, particularly now, more even than it was in the past, they have to have a place for the children to go so they can go out and get a job that's going to take them 40, 60 hours a week in corporate America, sitting in a cubicle, checking off boxes in a form or something, that will earn them money, or in a public sector job, that they're all wage slaves to a system.
That's right.
And so they have to have a babysitting service. They can't do it. We don't have extended families anymore. And so they need to have a place where the children can go so they can do their work to get money to buy bread. It's all class and economic inappropriate organization of the society, how we form capital or accumulate capital investment, and how we distribute demand or buying power to the people. It's all based on them being wage slaves as the only way to get money by the overall system, which has not produced leaders that can get a system that is liberating of the human spirit, but is only enslaving them on outdated notions of what human nature is.
And if the government, as it claims, in my opinion, falsely...
Not only the government, the corporate.
Right.
I mean, don't keep saying the government only, because it's also the corporate structure, the institutional structure of the society writ large. It's not just government. I mean, in my view.
No, in my view, I agree with you, but to me, the government is a weapon that the corporations use. They have hijacked the process. They own the government. They have their people there in key positions, and they use the power of the government with the judges, the police, and the whole legal system.
And the commercial power of the corporate.
Yes,
It's
of course.
both. It's private sector and public.
they have both.
There's a little circle of human values in the
have
family.
both. They have
but that
hijacked-
has very little influence on what influences what people can do. They're all caught up with where they have to spend most of their life going to some place
Yeah, they
to
have
earn a
certain
living.
parameters to keep control. I
Yeah,
think-
so the family's breaking down in the way
and
it
it's on
used to
purpose.
do.
And it's
Yeah.
on purpose because if, as you mentioned, the economic need for the parents, so they have to use babysitters. The government is willing to spend about 11 times more breaking families apart, and this is based on the work of Professor Dorothy Roberts in her book, Shattered Bones: The Color of Foster Care.
Okay, we get to foster care, which
Right,
interrelates.
which, they rather use money to break down the families that, in my opinion, if the government was sincere about caring about children as they claim, they will pay one of the parents, ideally the mother, but if the mother wants to work, let the father stay home. They should pay a good salary for one of the parents to take care of those children. But
But
they
they can't justify that in market terms.
right, but they
She's
rather
not doing anything. She's just a mother.
Well, but why
There's
do
no
they-
value being
why-
added to society.
Why do they spend 11 times more money in foster care, in universal pre-K, in daycare centers government run? You see, they spend 11 times more in social causes that are going to feed the prison system, the homeless population, the mental ill populations, which are growing industries. So you can see if really one of the parents could be paid a full salary to stay home and take care of the children. No one on earth could take as good care of those children as the parents, but they have forced the family to break apart. 50 years ago, a man could have 5 children on average, which is unusual these days, and
One job.
work one job
Raise
and
their
take care
family,
of the
send
whole
them through
family
college.
and have his wife at home taking care of those children.
Yeah.
But now both of them have to work and barely they can survive
That's
and
right.
have maybe one
Women
or
have
two
to
children.
work 2 jobs and they're still poverty.
Right, just to pay the rent.
Okay.
So you can see that it is a mechanism of population
It's
control.
economics.
Right, but it's on purpose because they had to take the woman out of the home so they can break the family and take control of those children. So
Well,
it's easier.
the women who are part of the feminist movement would say that's not taking them out of the home. That's giving them an opportunity
think
to
the-
become
the-
successful CEOs of corporations
I think
and
that
run the
was-
world and have the feminine principle there. And she shouldn't be stuck in the home with kids all the time. She should Stepford-wise
I think
kind
that
of view of the universe.
that's the
You
so-called.
understand?
I understand.
Yeah.
I happen
and
to
that the
visit-
women should have a chance to grow and become academics and doctors and lawyers.
But
and
with
all that.
children who go to prison, who use drugs, who end in mental institutions, who have to be looking at a psychiatrist and taking those medications all the time, that's what they have done.
How about if we did something like this? You're talking about that. That I can't quite see because the mothering has always just been assumed to have no value.
I think it has a
there's
great
no-
value, has a
no,
superior value.
No, you're talking. You and I agree. Mothering and fathering for that
That
matter,
because we
great
have
value.
a fake Mickey Mouse
I
left in the
agree with
United
you,
States
but in
that
term-
pushes the destruction of the family when the
But the-
family is the last bastion of resistance.
Okay,
to people.
well, I would agree in large principle with that, but the motherhood, particularly when she was at home, no money ever went to them. They had to cut. The money came to the father who went to a factory and worked.
But
Or
her
just-
job was taking care of the children.
Yeah, but her
and
job
nobody-
had no way in terms of our economics, our economic system of having money get to them for doing what every mother
Right,
does.
she wasn't paying income tax.
She wasn't paying anything. She wasn't paying anything. There was of no value. That kind of thing.
But as a capital, human value has a high capital value because she was protecting those children from negative
But it's never
influence.
been able to be established. You would
That's
like
correct.
it if there was that established in the
And
society.
I am
Wait a minute, I'm going to follow through with you on this, and if I could. You would like it to be established to where, let's say a mother, and particularly you, they seem to be more in touch with the youthful thing, and the young teachers are all, in the younger grades, are all women. It seems to be like that, and everything. But you seem to think it would be good if the mother's value at the family nurture level, there could be a stipend or a salary.
A full salary.
A stream of buying power, of ability to have what you need to the mother as a mother. That would be a good thing. Let's say.
Right, and if the mother
Now,
goes
let
to
me-
go out of the house, let the father stay home with the children.
Okay,
Let
yeah,
them work.
yeah, but wait a minute. Let me pursue it further. And why wouldn't it be good for there to be a system that has a stream of income going to people, individuals, mother and father, which is not tied to them having a job doing something within corporate or government bureaucracies, a means of having an income other than their labor participation in the labor market. If everybody had a stream, suppose you had the capital formed in a way where the ownership of the combine or some great capital instrument is owned by everybody rather than a small elite. Do you understand? Can you follow?
Well, you will need redistribution of wealth for that.
No, you need, no, redistribution talks about divvying up a small pie and deciding how much can go to each one. But if you have a large production and you have sufficiency, then there could be the capital formed in a way where the ownership of the capital is producing wealth. Let's say a factory that can produce automobiles and turn them out, and they don't need people like Henry Ford had to have to turn the nuts on the assembly line in a way. If they did that and they had a stream of income that came to them because they had ownership of that capital instrument. Now, if they had that, then they would get income coming to them or their account because they have an ownership stake of, let's say,
there would be corners.
Let me finish. Private sector, and that would free them to do what they want to do, and they could do what they want to do, and that could be involved like taking care of the kids, having a good family life, cultural things, all the works of civilization. It could liberate them from the wage slave task that maybe the technology is freeing them from having to have people doing wage slave little functions within a society which have no real value. It has to be manufactured in the minds of people. But what if everybody had a stream of income so that they could be independently able to meet their needs and their reasonable wants?
I think it would be great, but I think that's a little far in the future, because as it is now, they are taking more money out of people, and people are making less money in buying power. So people are not getting better off. People are getting poorer.
No, it's because government or corporate or the political process reifies or sanctifies work. In terms of you're going somewhere to a corporate cubicle office and filling out forms or doing something that's going to be with an algorithm replaced. And Keynes said that you're going to be replacing the input of labor to production. You get an algorithm that can displace 500,000 people.
Correct.
You don't need them. And you don't need the people to perform some wage slave function. And so what we should do is have an alternative way of distributing income.
Maybe people should work less hours.
Maybe they should work no hours.
4 hours a day.
Take it two, half an hour or something down, because the real input of labor is diminishing to the vanishing point in terms of its relation.
Right, and we use
the capital is all owned by a tiny class.
And we use a lot of the resources are being wasted in the prison system, in the mental health industry.
And it's all because why those things
and the war machine. The war machine is a tremendous waste.
But all of that is done because people do not have money. People need to have money. And it shouldn't be tied up with I heard you use the term human resources. That's going to put an economic value on that person sitting in that cubicle. The input to production by human labor. Somebody filling a seat in a corporate boardroom, or doing the things they've had to do in order to have the economic system work, are not working and will not work. It's make work both in the corporate world and in the public world, and they have to try and conform to that because they simply will not allow there to be an alternative way of distributing money to people so that they have money as a given and they don't have to do anything for it. Now that's the promise of what the technology heralds, and we don't have a system. Well, and then people could do what they want.
I'm not so sure.
Free from it's all money and economics that constrain things.
To a certain degree, you need a challenge to have a meaning in life. Let me
wait a minute. If you did that, suppose you had that. If you're not slaving away on an assembly line for 8 hours to earn something to make an automobile, or sitting in cubicle corporate doing something, filling out forms that could be done, that's the only way you get meaning. I think the things they ask people to get meaning from in the workspace is the meaning.
But who's going to distribute that well?
Well, the distribution,
the government, or
Well, you seem to have this grief against the government. The government, that would be if you were a left wing, you'd say the government can intervene in the market because the market is dog eat dog and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm trying to get at is it maybe liberation is at hand from the constraint, from the demands of an outdated and inappropriate way in which we form capital, or have capital, technological oriented productive systems, and distribute demand or buying power. Because if the people don't have buying power, and Keynes said you're going to have technologically induced unemployment. People are fighting to get a job so they can put a little bread on the table, and they're like slaves.
That's right.
They're like slaves.
There's a rat race to the bottom because there's very
so what they're going to have to do, they're going to have to liberate the people from the need to be a wage slave. And the left wing doesn't seem to.
But the left wing wants more government power, which is going to slave more the people. That's not the solution.
It doesn't matter whether it's left wing or right wing, and the corporatocracy is no better.
Correct.
So
we should reduce government to the very minimum. I'm going to give you an example.
Why not intrusion by corporate propaganda, corporate everything? We're a corporatocracy. It's all the private sector that owns everything. The government is just their handmaiden in many cases. We've got a new Congress coming in. They're going to be, and the Republicans are going to come in, and they're going to get rid of Social Security. Those people getting Social Security should be eliminated. Everything should be, and they're going to be singing the praises of the work ethic or human capital. It's not human capital. What they should be doing is they're going to have to be liberated, and then they could do something meaningful like parenting, painting, sculpture, all the arts, all the goods of civilization that really matter, in a way where they're liberated, have their needs and reasonable wants met. That would be a liberated order rather than enslaving.
I want to give you an example like
and the foster care. We got to keep
Sweden. It's a nanny state. The government takes care of the people to a certain degree.
You're back to the nanny state. You're back to the government. Why the brief against government? Because the corporate entity, the private, you've only got private sector and government. Those are the two things that run society. And then there's manipulation, political, media manipulation, but they're both doing the same thing.
People taking control of it without corporate, without government? Why couldn't the people take control of their destiny, and they have to either rely on the slavery of the government or the slavery of the corporate sector?
What they have to do is, if you've got capital forming, that's corporate. They're making profit. They're making money. The way they do that, the people who already are rich get richer and richer.
What about the communities taking control of their destiny without the government or the corporate?
Well, you're going to have at a community level, it's government. If you have you have a city council, you have a mayor, you have a local thing, it's government.
Those are elected officials.
But that's government.
That's good. You need to stay away from the government.
Why?
The community.
Why? You're going to stay there with the corporate.
Because the government is corrupt. I mean, all those politicians.
The corporations.
I agree.
Okay, it's all corrupt.
But the community
and inadequate.
Don't need the elected officials. They can run the business.
If you don't, that's where the money comes from. It comes in the money, dollars. It comes from either a government thing coming in.
It doesn't have that.
Or it comes from a corporate thing. A job or an asset that gives you income coming to you, or some sort of Social Security. That's where people get money.
But people could get together, let's say a community, a neighbor gets together, and they form the community learning center that has nothing to do with the government.
Okay, go ahead.
It has nothing to do with corporations.
And what would they do?
They will educate, they will give education to the children.
Education and they will control what?
Prepare them for life.
Yeah, but is there going to be a building? Is there going to be costs?
Oh,
there going to be capital costs? Are there going to be salaries having to be paid? You think it can be all done on the cheap? They got no money. They got no money. Where are they going to get their money?
Well, everyone is even putting chipping in. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I used to live in Peru.
Yeah.
And in Peru there was a lot of what they call shanty towns. They call it pueblos jóvenes.
Yeah.
People who wouldn't have space in the city, but they were around the big city. People who used to come from the high mountains to the capital looking for a better life. They didn't find a better life, so they would probably live in these slums. And since there were very few jobs, the men would go to work. You were at 5 in the morning on the highway, and you could see thousands of people, men mostly, walking to get to the factories in the town.
Yeah.
In the little shanty towns, the women got together, and they chip in, and they will use huge, gigantic piles to cook food for 200 families in the area, and like a little cooperative. And there were other women who would do the education, others would do the babysitting, and it was something that they will spend pennies compared to what the government would do. And they will have a real education, those children. There was a lot of cooperation, and it needs to be organic. It needs to be based on the people, neither in the government, neither in the corporations, because it's between
like a cooperative.
That's correct.
Like
and that's
what in Spain, they had a cooperative.
That's why
and it was owned by the people.
People
there were capital assets involved, and more production is not done on cooperative things. It's done by corporate entities now.
Well, but
automobiles, televisions, computers, communication, everything is done at a very large level, and I don't think the cooperative thing is going to be able to work. Is Ecuador now in total good shape? Or not Ecuador, but Peru? I lived 2 years in Bolivia.
I think it was a survival skill that they developed based on the circumstances.
You said that they all came from the countryside and there were no jobs.
That's right.
What if we had, and it's true, and the trend on the world is for what is jobs are being taken over by algorithms. It's being taken over by technology. You don't need people to create things, hardly anymore. And yet we think about human resources. They're going to get educated. They're going to be able. Their value is so great because they're so important to production. People aren't that important to production. What's important are capital instruments, increasingly. And the trend is going almost to the vanishing point. There's got to be an alternative way to get. It's not going to. A cooperative can do something. An alternative way to get money to people outside of a job. You see, it's like slaves. They think the only way they can get money, the people at the top who own the assets, they get richer every day when they sleep because they own the capital assets.
That's right.
And the people that are poor, they just say, oh, it's okay. It's like kings of old. They're in big houses there, and we'll live in the mud. We'll live in the poverty, and we don't want anything except a chance to pick up some leaves on their estate or do something where they'll give us a little money to buy bread. They don't talk about having the capital should be formed in a way where everybody owns private sector. It could be private sector ownership as a means of doing the financing so that you could have capital assets to do what we're technologically capable of doing without having those people getting in the way.
I agree. Workers should be owners of the means of production.
Okay. Over the means of production. Okay, and the means of production are no longer workers. They got this labor theory of value, how important labor is. And what they got to do is get an ownership stake to everybody so that they get income coming from the production, and then they have the money to clear the market. As Lord Keynes said, you're going to be confronted with technological unemployment. Now everybody's saying all they can say is we've got to create jobs. You're not going to get jobs created because the private sector won't do it.
They're right. They rather spend some of the places where labor is less expensive.
The point is the left or that intellectuals are all hung up on how important a job is. You know, what we're confronted with is we're going to have an alternative way for everybody to get money other than doing something.
Right, but in that I agree.
Human resources. That is a dirty term in my idea. It's just a way.
In that way, the global elites will lose control, and they want to control. Money is not the problem. They have all the money they can have.
Money is the problem. It's all economics. It's all economics.
Right, but they have all what is
important. They have a great advantage.
They want to keep control by any means necessary.
It's always been like that since Pizarro. Since Pizarro came, the Indians were enslaved, and they've always enslaved. You understand that?
Yeah,
history is a nightmare of injustice. It's always been unjust, but now it's
like the law of the jungle.
Yes, it's right, and it's unjust for the vast majority of people.
Very unjust.
The distribution of wealth between the wealthy and the poor is getting worse on a world scale. It's going to continue to get worse as long as the people who are interested in the people and the legitimacy of the people stick to this idea that they have to have a job while everybody else can own all the assets. They have to have a way of having income, and that would free people to do what they want to do.
I agree with you. Now I want to go back.
But nobody advances that, hardly at all, anywhere, because they're all caught up left wing, right wing, and the one thing is, it's okay for the ones who are rich to get richer as they sleep because they own the capital, but it's no good for the other people who own the capital, and the other people who have nothing but a job to offer in order to get money to buy bread for their kids.
And they can get fired any moment.
They accept it. And what happens if you get one where the supply and demand is in sync, then that's the way in which you could get liberation to where people could do the things that really matter rather than act as trained dogs in a corporate cubicle situation. The movie Office Space is really good, where they just rebel. It's great. It isn't worth doing. It isn't worth wasting your time going down to some corporation that's going to be getting rid of you anyway. They don't need you. You're just going to get in the way. And they don't need you. What they do need is to have a way of having them have money so they can buy what can be produced. There's supply and demand, and that's the problem, it seems to me. And all the problems are economic. If you get economic justice and distribution, then you're going to get the problems going away, and people will do what they want to, and they will have what they need and reasonably want in an ongoing way, and it can go, and the people of the world can be liberated.
I think it's an ideal, and I happen to agree with you. I want to go back.
It turns in with Gatto and the thought of it, and then education can come from the internet. Why anybody would want to go to a class or an institution where you're sitting there all this time listening to somebody ego trip on some idea that they're a high specialist? Why they would put up with
Well, also
that?
the socialization process is important.
Well, that's brought up often by people who say you have to be socialized rather than be.
I want to go back to the point of the
We only
parental.
got 10 minutes left, or 8 minutes left, so let's make sure we tie it into the foster care evils that happen.
One of the points I want to...
On a racial basis,
Yes.
it's racist.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the points I want to make is parochial schools. They may be narrow-minded. They may perpetrate very narrow point of view. But those children respect the parents. When you send your children to public school, the children learn to disrespect the parents. I have, because our organization advocates for family preservation, I have many mothers who have come crying and complaining that their own children beat them up. 14 years old. They have a 14-year-old girl
14-year-old kid could beat up a mother, yeah.
who wants to stay out with her boyfriend overnight.
They tend to want to do that at 14.
And the mother has no power because she disciplined her child. Her child will call the police, will call ACS, and ACS will take away all the children and put the mother in jail, arrest her. So
if you're black or brown.
That's right.
That doesn't happen out in the white suburbs.
No, I doubted that would happen.
It's
because
80-90%. 80-90%. And also the hassling of people on the street, black and brown. It's racist.
Right. 96.1% right now is 96.1%. It used to be 98.1% of all children in foster care are children in color in New York City. There is about
that high.
That's right.
In New York.
In New York City, about 16,000% of those children happen to be in New York City.
Black or Latino.
96.1. It used to be 10 years ago. It used to be 98. So it has little by little, maybe because now we also have Asians, particularly Muslims. After 9/11, people start calling on Muslim parents as a weapon to hurt them.
Yeah, right.
Now that's why the black and Latino has gone down to 96.1 instead of 98. But
it's still all out of sync with what should be the reality. Yeah.
It should be about totally.
It's just crying out.
It's one of the most racist systems, and it matches with the prison system, juvenile delinquency.
You got the same thing in the prisons, right?
That's
high black and brown, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's a mechanism. I call it social cancers.
Yeah.
So to me, foster care is one of the main social cancer producers. I went to speak with the legislatures in Albany here, and they tell me when they need to build new prisons, which is one of the booming businesses in New York State, they look at the number of children in foster care as the best predictor because they know that 75% of those children are going to end up in the prison system. So it's a social cancer.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's all economic.
I think that it's not only economic, it's also class, race.
Well, class
and race.
Well, but those two all come around to economic. Class and race.
I think that given an even environment of middle class white children and middle class black children, the black children who happen to be middle class, even if there is the same economics, they are probably in a more disadvantage of those children being taken and put in foster care if it's a middle class white family.
I doubt it. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that.
So that's why I think class
that's part
and
of
race.
That's part of a lingering racism And that is, now it's going over and also we used to have McCarthy. I remember that when you had that. Now it's the Muslims, too, are being scapegoated.
That's right.
And they scapegoat the poor and the weak. That's what society
I think foster care is a profit-driven predatory system,
right.
And as any predator, it preys on those who offer the least resistance.
Right, or the least ability to resist.
That's right.
Perhaps.
Particularly, also we have a lot of Latinos now, immigrants particularly, which have no knowledge of the language. Some of them may have no proper documentation. They are afraid. They don't know the laws. So the children get taken away under the most ridiculous excuses, and it takes a long time to get them back, if ever. And I want to point out that the system is predatory because also in the last 5 years, about more than 20,000 children coming from foster care, in my opinion, have illegally and forcibly adopted. When they have parents who want them back, but a judge, a family court judge, found those parents neglectful or abusive, which has nothing to do with reality.
That often happens under the level of rumor.
Right. And those children are sold to the best. It's like a slavery. To me, it's slavery. It's a modern day slavery.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And who are a lot of pedophiles are after those children because they are easy prey. I mean, I don't know. They were using them for experiments on using lethal drugs here at the Incarnation Children's Center in Washington.
You document a good deal of this.
That's right, and we have it on our website.
Yeah, and you have the website. Let's let them know. We only got a couple of minutes left. And it's
ParentsInAction.net.
Parents, ParentsInAction.net.
That's right, ParentsInAction.net.
It's a rich website. I've been there.
Yes, and we have information that area, particularly about the experiments with foster care children in New York City.
You got documentation
the guinea pig kids. They were using as rat labs, killing about 200 of them under the most ridiculous excuses, so these big pharma companies could have these drugs approved. They couldn't do it with other children because nobody will want to do that.
History is a nightmare.
That's right.
And that continues.
We only found out because a nurse who used to work there had a fight with the administration there at the Incarnation Children's Center, and she came to the news, and the New York Post published it on first page, and it was a scandal.
So you have this documented on your site.
In our website,
Good for you for the work and everything like that, and it's a really tricky time. I'm sorry we have to deliver this kind of news. It's required that we address these issues from schooling. Education is very important, foster care,
family preservation.
And you like the idea of the family preservation. I like the idea of a liberated family from the constraints that are what constitutes so much of human focus on what purpose is about and so forth. I think it's overly materialistic and so forth and all of that. And all of this we have to deliver to this program right here in the middle of the Christmas season. It's worthy of Dickens to talk about these kind of matters on the eve of the Christmas or the Christmas holiday season, which we would like to wish the very best to one and all as possible under the dire circumstances that plague us coming out of history. And we recommend that you go to this Rolando Bini's site, and again, it's ParentsInAction.net.
Yes.
A lot of very interesting fundamental questions raised there, and he's welcome you to Manhattan Network Public Access.
Thank you.
This program will be seen everywhere in the world. We want to get the word out on these questions because these questions confront us, and we touch on some of the solutions. It's very, very touching.
My motto is...
Are you optimistic, pessimistic for the human prospect?
I have great hopes in a better future. I think the golden age is coming sooner or later. Otherwise, we will be extinct. We have no choice.
We're in a point where we can destroy the species with our weapons?
If we don't think...
And then we would have to be in a point where some thinking is going to be able to liberate us from the constraints that we have by holding on and reifying outdated notions in institutional structures and notions of human nature that the future requires an alternative, liberated vision.
So my call is parents of the world, unite.
Parents of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your slavery.
That's right. You just break the shackles.
Okay, break the shackles.